Let's get a word on this and all the other big political stories of the day. Theo Usherwood is back with us, the political commentator. Afternoon to you, Theo.
A very good afternoon to you, Ian.
Nice to have you with us as ever. So it's 5 years to the day. Goodness me,
yes.
I was there in Manchester when the result was given back in 2016. We knew it was going to take a few years to put it all into place. We were working at the same place at the time when all of this was coming out. There wasn't a day. I remember the journalist Ian Dunt saying to me in about 2015, the reason he didn't want, I mean, Ian would be a Remainer, but the reason he didn't want a vote on it was because he said, we will talk about nothing else every day for the next 10 years. And he kind of turned out to be right on that. A rare moment where a socialist got it spot on. We've talked about nothing else. Every day, forever, there seemed to be a debate on this, and it kind of continues, maybe slightly less so these days, but it's still there. Nigel Farage saying if he was Prime Minister, we'd have a proper Brexit. And of course, Brexiteers argue that we never did get a proper Brexit.
Yes, I mean, I remember being in Parliament Square when, of course, we left the European Union. We had the countdown. Nigel Farage and his wing of the Leave campaign had a huge sort of stage in the middle of Parliament Square with musicians and singing and dancing. Of course, this is the moment when this is 5 years to the day when, of course, that Boris Johnson had just won the general election. The stalemate had been broken because he got that 80-seat majority. He was able to pass his deal with the European Union into law, which paved the way for our actual exit from the European Union. That was, of course, because Theresa May, the previous Prime Minister, had squandered a small Conservative majority in the general election of 2017, and it meant that we had that stalemate with no fewer than 3 meaningful votes on a deal that nobody could agree to, not least because the Conservatives didn't think that Theresa May's deal with the European Union amounted to, as they saw it, a proper Brexit. So, yes, 5 years since we left the European Union.
Just to interject, Theo, of course, Boris Johnson's spectacular deal, I've got it over the line, was kind of frighteningly similar to the Theresa May deal, right?
It was. Of course, it was. What it had, it was very frighteningly similar to the original Theresa May deal that she got, where she said, you know, no British Prime Minister would do a deal that would put a border down the middle of the Irish Sea. Then Boris Johnson said, and then she said that obviously wasn't palatable. So she went back to the European Union and came back with a deal that actually looked remarkably similar to our current state of actually being in the European Union, where we'd be a member of a customs union and would follow all the EU rules and regulations in order to stay within the customs union and have none of the benefits of actually having left the European Union. And of course, that wasn't palatable. So MPs ended up rejecting that as well. Boris Johnson, he got his deal. You know, there is effectively a tax border down the middle of the Irish Sea. You know, there's no getting away from it. We have, you know, Northern Ireland follows EU rules and regulations because it wants to uphold, and it was seen as a red line that Northern Ireland would have to uphold the Good Friday Peace Agreement, which means there can be no hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And the problem has been, hasn't it, that it's never felt as if the benefits that were promised from leaving the European Union have actually materialised. People don't feel, you know, let's take immigration, for example. You know, if you look at the numbers, numbers for last year were 700,000 net migration, 900,000, 750,000, even 900,000 for the year before. When you looked at the net migration figures, we were told we were going to get back control of our borders. If you think back to the years in the run-up to the referendum, actually they were bobbling around at around 200,000 or 300,000 net migration every single year. The economy, we were told we were going to get cheaper goods as a result of leaving the European Union. You know, 2022, 2023, we had inflation into the double digits, and many people have felt much worse off in the years since we left the European Union. To the question as to why Keir Starmer doesn't want to celebrate today as 5 years since we left the European Union, you might well make a case that there is nothing to celebrate. Nigel Farage makes a perfectly valid case that is argued that actually, in terms of leaving the European Union, we actually we haven't taken on the mantle of competing against the European Union.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do it properly, and this is the argument of true Brexiteers, and there is a cogent argument to this, by the way, that actually, if you're going to say that we exist outside the European Union, then you have to accept that we are in competition with the European Union, and that we want to create a Singapore on sea. That in effect, that outside of the European Union, we can have lower taxes, we can have fewer regulations, we can be much more attractive as a business destination for America, for economies in the Far East that want to import their goods into this country. And that actually the argument from the likes of Nigel Farage and those who have always supported this project, it's actually, if you do it properly, if you go for it and you recognise the very essence of what it should be, that we should be in a competition with the EU member states, and we should try and snaffle their business that might otherwise go in because they've got lots of rules and regulations, and pieces of timber have to be so long, and bananas have to be shaped in such a way that actually we could become quite an attractive place for the likes of Donald Trump's America especially to come and want to do business. But obviously Theresa May was never prepared to embrace that. Boris Johnson didn't embrace that, and Keir Starmer certainly isn't going to embrace that. Quite the opposite. There's some talk today that he might actually go for a youth mobility scheme of some description with the EU in order to secure closer trading ties for businesses that have interests in the European Union in order to get closer trading ties. So,
indeed,
there is in number 10, there is nothing to say that they are signed up to the Brexit project. Quite the opposite. I think they would quite like it if they could very quietly secure a closer relationship with the EU and get some and see GDP bounce as a result.
Yeah. Well, we're going to watch with interest. The next couple of years are going to be anything but dull on that front, I think, Theo. Thank you for that. Priti Patel confronted with proof migration soared while she was Home Secretary, Theo. That's not a headline Priti Patel wants to see or talk about, perhaps.
It was on Never Mind the Ballots, wasn't it?
Yes.
One of
Harry Cole.
Yeah, great. I mean, he's the best, isn't he, Harry? And I think it speaks to... it speaks to the problem that the Tories have, is that they're in a pincer movement. And what I mean by that is, obviously, you've got Labour, you've got the government saying, well, we're trying to fix the mess, we're trying to sort this, and we're trying to sort out what you left us in terms of migration numbers. And then on the other hand, on the other side of that pincer, you also have Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Usually when you have one government take over from another government, it's just about, and we saw this in 2010 with the coalition, when they took over from Gordon Brown, it's just about the new government saying, look at the mess and we've sorted it out.
Yeah.
The problem for the Conservatives is they're getting done from both sides. So they've got Keir Starmer saying, look at the inheritance we've got, look at the mess we've got to sort out. And then they've got Reform coming in from the other side saying, look at the mess you left, and Labour are not going to sort it out. And actually, Nigel Farage is saying, I need to be Prime Minister to come in and sort it out. So they're getting pincered. And that's the biggest problem for Kemi Badenoch and for Priti Patel. There is nobody in the country that thinks, apart from almost Kemi Badenoch and Priti Patel, that thinks they've done a good job, especially when it comes to dealing with immigration. And that's ultimately the issue, is that they're getting hit, they're getting whacked from both sides of the debate with this. And that's why you can see for Kemi Badenoch, in terms of her leadership, she would much rather that she and her shadow cabinet just said, hands up, we made a mistake, we didn't get it right, and we need to be honest about it, rather than going in front of somebody like Harry Cole again.
Indeed, and of course, Priti Patel says, look, these were not illegal migrants. These are people that came on humanitarian visas. The majority arrived on work or study visas. I mean, I don't know whether that part of this argument's ever going to disappear, even though the numbers are huge. I mean, we saw the story last week about the population increase of the United Kingdom over the next 5, 6, 7 years and such. I don't know what the way around that is. I mean, education is a huge business in this country. And if people come to work, then great. There is a suspicion that not everybody does. And there's some iffy goings on with bringing your auntie and 7 cousins with you and all of that. But, I mean, is that particular component of this discussion ever going to be removed? I doubt it.
The problem we've got in this country is that we aren't training up young people to go into the jobs where we desperately need them to be. Let's just take the NHS, for example, right? The NHS needs doctors, it needs nurses, it needs people, auxiliary staff, to work right across the NHS. And at the moment, we can't get the kids out of school, through the colleges, through the further education establishments, in to fill those jobs. And so the Department for Health and Social Care needs to be able to say to the Home Office, we need so many health and social care visas to get people into this sector to fill those jobs. And that's not just in health and social care, it's right across the board. And then you end up in a situation where they're bringing their aunts and their aunties, or their aunts and their uncles and their children or whatever. The reason those provisions exist, Ian, is because we need to make this country as an attractive as place as possible for those people to come and work. And if you say to nurses in, let's say we want to bring in nurses from Kenya, if you say to them, well, you can't bring a spouse, they're just not going to say, well, I don't want to leave my family behind. I want to bring my family with me. Yeah. And then they'll turn down the opportunity to come and work in this country. And that's the issue, that until we get the young people through our colleges to fill those positions, we're not going to solve this particular problem.
Now let's move to this final story. This is your own story that you were able to bring to the table here, Theo. The Holocaust exhibition in Parliament, apparently too political to be displayed. So what's the background to this? What's happened?
So the background to this is there's this he's a great guy. He's called Mark Cave. And he works at the National Holocaust Centre, Museum and Centre. And he had an exhibition called The Vicious Circle. It's a travelling exhibition. It's not particularly big. And it tells the story of anti-Jewish pogroms since World War II, from Kristallnacht in 1938, all the way, of course, up to what happened on October the 7th, 2023. And to mark Holocaust Memorial Day, he applied for that exhibition to be in Westminster Hall. Now, you'll remember Westminster Hall is, when you arrive at the House of Commons, it's this large hall that was originally Parliament, which is where everybody kind of congregates. And he was told in writing, well, I'm very sorry, Mr. Cave, you can't have your exhibition because we can't have anything that's political in Westminster Hall. Everything has to be neutral, which would have been, you'd have thought, and Mr. Cave initially said, OK, I accept this. The only problem is, Ian, that we've seen repeated photographs of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign having mass lobbying events in Westminster Hall. And now there's no suggestion, of course, the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, was involved in this decision. It was made below him by a committee that said, that runs the events, that said, no, we can't have it. But Lord Pickles has come in, and he's, of course, the government special envoy for post-Holocaust issues, and heavily criticised the decision, pointing out, of course, that Westminster Hall is where Winston Churchill, our wartime leader, laid in state, saying he would have been appalled by the decision. And, of course, there is no greater fighter against anti-Semitism than Winston Churchill. And there's an appeal now, I guess, for the Speaker to come in and overrule that original decision.
The Commons authorities have said that exhibitions and mass lobbying events are treated differently when considering approval.
Yes, they do say that, but the email to Mark Cave was completely different. It painted a completely different picture. It said, actually, any event of any activity that could be deemed to be political cannot take place in the House in Westminster Hall. And it's worth noting that, and I think this is the real shame about it, is that we should, politics. I guess something's political when people disagree, right? Yeah. People disagree. I don't understand what's there to disagree about the horrors of what happened in the Holocaust. I don't understand what's there to disagree about the horrors of what happened on October the 7th, 2023. And this was I've seen the exhibition, by the way, and it's hugely powerful. And it just reminds people of the story that the Jewish people have suffered and the dangers that it just carries on, and trying to fight that anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hatred. And I brought the stories to the table, but personally, I really hope that the Commons authorities who aren't best pleased about the story actually manage to sort of change their tune.
Let's hope so. Theo, thank you as ever. Have a great weekend. Theo Usherwood, political commentator, with us on the programme.